My name is Kristen Adams, 36 years old, and I have always been the family disappointment. Behind my ordinary appearance and thrift store clothes lies a secret that would make my judgmental relatives choke on their expensive wine. Tonight at my parents' luxurious estate, my sister Diana will make her usual cutting remarks about my finances. Little does she know, tomorrow morning my face will grace the cover of Forbes magazine. The butler already has an advance copy waiting. If you want to see how I finally silenced my toxic family after years of their contempt, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to catch more stories about sweet karma. I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a sprawling colonial home with 6 bedrooms, a tennis court, and parents who measured success exclusively in Ivy League degrees and social connections. My father, Robert Adams, built his investment firm from the ground up, and my mother, Eleanor, came from old money with a family name that opened doors throughout Manhattan's elite circles. From kindergarten, they plotted my path. Prestigious private schools, Yale University, like my father, then a respectable career in finance or law, culminating in marriage to someone from the right family. Diana, my older sister by 3 years, followed this blueprint perfectly. Valedictorian at Westfield Academy, summa cum laude at Yale, then Harvard Law. She married Bradford Whitney, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in Boston. Diana became exactly what my parents wanted, and she never let me forget it. I was different from the beginning. While Diana mastered piano and excelled at lacrosse, I spent hours dismantling computers and rebuilding them with modifications. My bedroom looked like a small electronics workshop by the time I was 12. My parents tolerated my hobby because I still maintained perfect grades, but they never understood my passion. Computers are for the IT department, Kristen, my father would say dismissively. Adams women lead organizations, not hide behind screens. When I got accepted to Yale on my own merits, my parents were relieved. Finally, I was conforming. But halfway through my junior year, I discovered a security vulnerability in the university network that could have compromised thousands of students' personal data. After alerting the administration and helping fix the issue, I realized my calling. I dropped out the next semester to launch my startup. The family reaction was nuclear. You threw away an Ivy League education to play with computers? My mother cried for days. My father threatened to cut me off financially, thinking that would force me back to school. When I stood my ground, he followed through. Diana, ever the loyal daughter, sided with them completely. You will regret this for the rest of your life, she told me coldly. Some people just are not cut out for real success. With nothing but $5,000 in savings and a prototype security algorithm I had developed, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Seattle. Those early days were brutal. I lived on ramen noodles and worked 18-hour days. 6 months in, my savings depleted, and no investor interest yet. I swallowed my pride and applied for food assistance. The day I used food stamps for the first time, Diana called to gloat about her promotion to junior partner at her law firm. "How is your little computer project going?" she asked, not waiting for an answer before launching into her own news. I never told my family about the food stamps, but somehow, Diana found out through a mutual acquaintance. She made sure to casually mention it during Thanksgiving dinner that year. "At least you are getting free food somewhere, since you cannot afford to contribute to holiday meals anymore," she said sweetly as she passed me the mashed potatoes. What my family never understood was that my little computer project had enormous potential. I had developed an AI-driven security system that could predict and prevent cyber attacks with 97% accuracy, far beyond anything on the market. But investors were skeptical of a young female college dropout with no connections. After that humiliating Thanksgiving, I made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, I would succeed without any family support or connections. Second, when my company took off, I would remain anonymous as its CEO and founder. It took another 8 months of near poverty before Catherine Mitchell, a veteran tech investor who actually understood my technology, took a chance on me. Her initial $500,000 investment kept the company afloat long enough to perfect the product and secure our first client, a regional bank concerned about increasing cyber threats. As Secure Vision gained more clients, I made sure my identity remained confidential. On paper, I was simply Kristen Adams, Product Development Director. We created a fictional CEO named K.E. Adams who never appeared in public, communicating only through written statements and occasionally voice-only conference calls, which were actually me using a slight vocal disguise. The company grew exponentially over the next 10 years. From banking, we expanded into government contracts, healthcare systems, and eventually international markets. Every major tech company tried to identify K.E. Adams, offering partnerships and acquisitions, but I maintained my anonymity, communicating through carefully chosen representatives. Meanwhile, my family still thought I was struggling. I intentionally lived below my means, staying in a modest house in a middle-class Seattle neighborhood, driving a reliable but unremarkable car, and wearing practical, unflashy clothes. When I visited my family, which became increasingly rare, I maintained the image of someone just getting by. Diana, now with 2 children in private school and a summer house in the Hamptons, never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast in our lifestyles. My parents, while less openly cruel, made their disappointment clear in subtle ways, from pointed questions about my retirement planning to offers of financial help that were really just reminders of my perceived failure. Last month, Forbes approached Secure Vision about a feature story. After a decade of success, and with the company now valued at $11 billion, our board felt it was time to reveal the mysterious founder. After careful consideration, I agreed. The story would coincide with our launch of a revolutionary personal cybersecurity product that could protect individual users from the most sophisticated scams and identity theft attempts. The interview took place in our Seattle headquarters, with professional photographs taken against a backdrop of our development labs. I spoke openly about my journey, the technological innovations we had created, and why I had remained anonymous for so long. In tech, especially as a woman, being underestimated can be an advantage, I explained. It allowed the work to speak for itself. The issue would hit newsstands tomorrow. The headline, Meet Tech's Most Secretive Billionaire CEO. My net worth, conservatively estimated at $4.2 billion, would be public knowledge. My family would finally learn the truth about their supposed failure of a daughter. And by pure coincidence, tonight was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary dinner. The call from my publicist came just as I was getting dressed for dinner. Kristen, the Forbes issue is being distributed early. Some copies are already arriving at subscribers' homes today, instead of tomorrow. My heart rate doubled instantly. What about my parents' area? Westchester County should get deliveries tomorrow morning as planned, but online access to the digital version goes live at midnight tonight. I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. The dinner started at 7. Technically, I could still attend the anniversary celebration and be gone before anyone saw the article. But something inside me wanted to be there when they found out. 10 years of condescension and judgment deserved a front row seat to the revelation. Thanks for the heads up, I told my publicist. I have to go now. Family dinner. She laughed, knowing the situation. Good luck. Call me after the fireworks. I hung up and stared at my closet, suddenly second-guessing my outfit choice. Part of me wanted to show up in designer clothes for once, to give them a hint before the big reveal. But the wiser part knew the impact would be greater if I maintained my usual appearance until the very end. I selected a simple black blouse, dark jeans, and comfortable flats, finishing with minimal makeup and my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Looking in the mirror, I saw exactly what my family expected to see. Modest, unassuming Kristen, who never quite measured up. Perfect. The drive from my hotel to my parents' estate took 20 minutes. I could have afforded to stay somewhere more luxurious than the mid-range airport hotel, but old habits die hard, and maintaining appearances had become second nature. As I turned onto the long private driveway leading to the house, memories flooded back, learning to ride a bike on this smooth pavement. The summer parties where I always felt awkward among the children of my parents' friends. The day I loaded my car to leave for Seattle, my father watching disapprovingly from the front steps. The house itself was imposing, A colonial revival with white columns and perfect symmetry. Light spilled from every window, illuminating the manicured lawn and precisely trimmed hedges. 3 luxury vehicles already occupied the circular driveway. My parents' Mercedes, Diana, and Bradford's Range Rover, and a Jaguar I did not recognize, likely belonging to my Uncle Harold, my father's brother. I parked my 5-year-old Toyota behind the Jaguar, the contrast almost comical. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the gift bag containing an expensive bottle of wine that no one would know cost more than some people's monthly rent, and approached the massive front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal James, my parents' longtime butler. Unlike my family, James had always treated me with genuine respect. "Miss Kristen, welcome home," he said warmly. "May I take your coat?" "Thank you, James. How have you been?" "Very well, thank you. And yourself?" There was something in his eyes, a glimmer of knowledge, that made me wonder if he somehow knew my secret. But that was impossible. "I have been doing well, thanks," I replied, handing him the wine. "A lovely selection," he commented, examining the bottle with appreciation that suggested he recognized its quality, despite the lack of ostentatious packaging. "The family is gathered in the main living room." I nodded gratefully and headed toward the sound of conversation and classical music. With each step, I felt myself shrinking back into the role I had played for years. The underachieving younger daughter, the family disappointment, the cautionary tale they told their friends' children about the importance of completing your degree. Voices grew louder as I approached the living room. Diana's distinctive laugh, sharp and controlled like everything else about her. My mother's softer tones, always measured. My father's authoritative baritone, used to commanding rooms. And other voices, family, friends, and relatives gathered to celebrate 4 decades of what everyone in their circle considered a model marriage. I paused in the doorway, observing the scene before anyone noticed me. My mother, elegant at 68, in a tailored navy dress, accepting congratulations from a small circle of friends. My father, distinguished with silver hair, discussing something with Uncle Harold beside the fireplace. Diana and Bradford holding court on the expensive leather sofa, their perfect posture and coordinated outfits like something from a lifestyle magazine. My cousin Melissa spotted me first. "Kristen, you made it." Her enthusiastic greeting drew everyone's attention to the doorway. Instantly, the room's energy shifted. My mother's smile became slightly strained. My father's expression remained neutral, but his shoulders stiffened. Diana's eyes performed a quick assessment of my outfit, her slight smirk indicating she found it appropriately underwhelming. "Darling, you came," my mother said, crossing the room to air kiss near both my cheeks. "We were not sure if you could get away from work." The irony of her statement almost made me laugh. If she only knew what getting away from work actually entailed for me, having to reschedule calls with international technology leaders and delegate decisions on multi-million-dollar contracts, I would not miss it, I said sincerely. Despite everything, they were still my parents, and part of me had always hoped for their approval. "Kristen," my father acknowledged with a nod, not bothering to cross the room. "Glad you could make it." Diana approached, Bradford a half step behind her. "Little sister," she said, embracing me stiffly. "That top is holding up well. Wasn't that what you wore to Christmas 2 years ago?" And so it began. The subtle digs, the backhanded compliments, the reminders of my perceived status. The weight of it felt almost comforting in its familiarity, like an uncomfortable sweater you have worn too long to discard. "Diana, you look lovely as always," I replied evenly. The next 30 minutes consisted of small talk with relatives I rarely saw, each conversation inevitably turning to what everyone else in the room had accomplished recently. Uncle Harold's new yacht, cousin Melissa's daughter getting into Princeton early decision, Diana's recent feature in a legal journal, Bradford's expanding real estate portfolio. When asked about my life, I gave my usual vague answers about work being busy but good and sidestepped questions about dating or buying property. Each evasion reinforced their collective assumption. Kristen is still struggling, still hasn't figured life out, still the family straggler. As James announced dinner was served, I caught myself wondering what they would say If they knew I had recently donated more to Yale's computer science department than my father had given in his entire lifetime, by tomorrow night, they would know that and so much more. The anticipation made the constant stream of condescension almost entertaining. The formal dining room was a showcase of old wealth and careful curation. A crystal chandelier hung above a mahogany table that could seat 20, though tonight it was set for 10. Fine china, sterling silver, and crystal glasses gleamed under the warm lighting. Fresh flower arrangements perfumed the air, and the wall of windows offered a view of the illuminated garden beyond. Name cards directed each guest to their assigned seats, and I was unsurprised to find myself positioned at the far end of the table, beside Uncle Harold's wife Judith, and across from Cousin Melissa. Diana and Bradford sat near my parents at the head of the table, positions of honor for the favorite daughter and her perfect husband. James and another server I did not recognize began pouring wine as we settled into our seats. I noticed with private amusement that it was a different bottle than the one I had brought. My parents always insisted on controlling every detail, including which gifts were worthy of being used. "A toast," my father announced, raising his glass once everyone was served, "to 40 years with the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. Eleanor, you have been my partner, my conscience, and my heart. Here is to 40 more." Glasses clinked, and approving murmurs rippled around the table. My parents' marriage, for all its traditional rigidity, was genuinely strong. They had built their life according to a specific vision and executed it flawlessly, from careers to children to social standing. The fact that Diana fit perfectly into that vision while I did not was simply an unfortunate deviation they had learned to explain away. "And to our wonderful children," my mother added, "who have brought us such pride and joy. Diana, leading her department at one of Boston's most prestigious firms, while raising 2 beautiful children. And Kristen, who has always forged her own path." The pause before "forged her own path" contained volumes. It was their polite way of acknowledging my existence without endorsing my choices. I smiled and sipped my wine, finding it mediocre despite its expensive label. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup that James served with practiced precision. Conversation flowed around business connections, recent vacations, and the achievements of various family friends. I contributed little, allowing my uncle to dominate our end of the table with stories about his recent golf trip to Scotland. "So, Kristen," Bradford called from the other end, during a lull in conversation, "Diana tells me you are still with that small tech company. What is it you do there exactly?" "IT support." His tone suggested he already knew the answer and found it suitably unimpressive. Diana smiled encouragingly, as if she were genuinely interested in my response, rather than setting up another opportunity to highlight the contrast between us. "I work in security software development," I answered simply. "That sounds technical," my mother said, with the same enthusiasm she might use to describe dental surgery. My father frowned slightly. "Is there much future in that role? At your age, you should be thinking about advancement opportunities. There is always need for good computer people," Uncle Harold offered kindly, though his phrasing made clear he considered it blue-collar work. "I am sure Kristen is doing the best she can with her background," Diana said, managing to make supportive words sound deeply patronizing. "Not everyone is cut out for leadership." I bit back a laugh, thinking about the team of 300 developers who reported up through my organization, and the executive board that implemented my strategic vision. Instead, I nodded appreciatively at Diana's support. "The market for technical talent is actually quite good," I said mildly. "I am comfortable." "Comfortable is fine when you are young," my father replied. "But eventually you need to think about building real wealth. Property, investments, retirement planning." "Speaking of property," Bradford interjected smoothly, "we just closed on a beautiful lakefront parcel in the Berkshires, 3 acres with private water access. We are breaking ground on a vacation home this spring." And just like that, the conversation shifted back to the achievements of those who had followed the approved path. The main course arrived, perfectly cooked beef tenderloin with roasted vegetables and truffle-infused potatoes. I ate quietly, observing the family dynamics with the detached interest of an anthropologist. Diana dominated the conversation, detailing her children's accomplishments at their exclusive private school and her recent victory in a high-profile corporate case. Each story was crafted to emphasize her success, while appearing humble, a skill she had mastered over years of practice. The judge actually cited my precedent argument in his ruling, she concluded, accepting the appreciative murmurs with a modest smile. But enough about my boring legal cases. Kristen, catch us up on your life. Any interesting developments? All eyes turned to me expectantly. The trap was set. Anything significant I might share would pale in comparison to what had already been discussed. Anything modest would confirm their assessment of my limited success. Work keeps me busy, I replied, but I enjoy what I do. And what about your personal life? My mother pressed. Any special someone? You are not getting any younger, dear. Diana glanced at Bradford with affection. Having a supportive partner makes such a difference in building a successful life. Bradford has been instrumental in my career advancement, handling so much at home when I have big cases. The right connections also matter, my father added. Bradford introduced Diana to the Havershams, which led to her firm landing their corporate account. Networking is everything in building a career. I am sure Kristen meets interesting people in the technical field, cousin Melissa offered. Trying to be kind but missing the mark entirely. Mostly other computer people, I would imagine, Diana said with a small laugh. Though, I suppose that world has its own version of success. The second wine of the evening was being poured, a rare vintage my father began explaining in detail. I recognized it immediately, having added several cases to my own collection last year, but maintained an expression of polite ignorance as he educated the table on its province and tasting notes. This particular vineyard produces only 800 bottles annually, he explained. Their waiting list for allocations is quite exclusive. As the dinner progressed through its carefully orchestrated courses, the conversation continued its predictable pattern. Accomplishments were shared, connections were name-dropped, and subtle comparisons were made. Through it all, I maintained my role as the underachieving daughter, the family member who had chosen an incomprehensible alternative path and was now paying the price in reduced status and financial limitations. Little did they know that in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The thought kept me smiling, through each thinly veiled insult and expression of concern about my future. As dessert was being served, an elaborate chocolate creation, accompanied by fresh berries and gold leaf, the conversation turned more directly toward finances. My father had always believed money talk was appropriate among family, a philosophy that had enabled decades of subtle comparisons and status assessments. Bradford and I are considering establishing trust funds for the children, Diana announced, spooning a precise amount of dessert onto her fork. With the current tax implications, it makes sense to start the wealth transfer early. A wise decision, my father nodded approvingly. We started yours and Kristen's when you were born, though of course Kristen accessed hers early for, what was it again, dear? That computer venture that did not pan out? This was a deliberate mischaracterization. I had never touched my trust fund, which remained intact, but modest, compared to what Diana had received over the years, through various additions my parents had made to reward her choices. Actually, I never used the trust fund, I corrected calmly. I wanted to build something on my own merits. Diana laughed lightly. Yes, your famous independence. Though, if I recall, that independence led to some rather lean times. Mother told me you were shopping at discount grocery stores for quite a while. My mother had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I only mentioned it because I was concerned, dear. There is no shame in accepting family support during difficult periods. I remember those days, Diana continued, warming to her topic. Wasn't there a period when you were actually on public assistance? Food stamps, was it? The table went momentarily quiet. Even in this family, directly mentioning someone's financial struggles was crossing a line. But Diana had always known exactly how far she could push while maintaining plausible deniability. Diana, my mother murmured, in token protest. What? I am not judging, Diana replied with feigned innocence. Many people need help sometimes. I just think it is important to acknowledge that choosing certain paths comes with consequences. My work with the Children's Foundation charity, has shown me how quickly financial circumstances can deteriorate without proper planning. Bradford nodded supportively. The statistics on failed entrepreneurship are quite sobering. Over 90% of startups fail within the first 5 years. Without family backing or significant personal capital, the numbers are even worse. Which is why we always stress the importance of making prudent choices, my father added, looking directly at me. Security should always come before risk. I took a slow sip of water, considering my response. For years, I had let comments like these slide, knowing that one day, the truth would come out. Now that day was quite literally hours away. Part of me wanted to end the charade immediately, to pull out my phone and show them the digital preview of tomorrow's Forbes cover. But a deeper part, the part that had endured years of their judgment, wanted them to fully commit to their narrative before it all came crashing down. I learned a lot during those difficult times, I said carefully. I am sure you did, Diana replied, her tone dripping with condescension. And yet here we are. What, 10 years later? Still in the same job, still renting rather than owning, still driving that same old car. Some people prioritize different things, Cousin Melissa interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. Diana ignored her. I am just concerned about your future, Kristen. Have you even started saving for retirement? Do you have health insurance through that small company? These are important considerations at our age. Diana, Bradford said quietly, perhaps sensing she was pushing too far. She ignored him too. I mean, are you still using food stamps? Diana asked with a small laugh that did not reach her eyes. Because, if things are still that tight, we could help you find a position more suitable to your qualifications. Bradford knows several companies that need administrative staff. The room went silent, except for the soft clink of silverware. Everyone looked uncomfortable, but no one contradicted Diana. My father examined his wine glass with sudden interest. My mother arranged her napkin in her lap. Uncle Harold and his wife exchanged glances. I thought about all the moments that had led to this one. The nights I had slept on a mattress on the floor of my first office. The investors who had turned me away without even looking at my prototype. The early employees who had taken a chance on my vision when we could barely make payroll. The gradual, hard-won growth of Secure Vision, from a desperate gamble to a global leader in cybersecurity. And suddenly, I felt calm. These people, with their narrow definition of success and their carefully curated lives, had no power over me anymore. Their judgment was based on a fiction I had allowed to continue, and in a matter of hours, that fiction would evaporate. Before I could respond to Diana's food stamps comment, James appeared at the doorway with unusual formality, even for him. Excuse the interruption, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the dining room. A special delivery has arrived for Miss Kristen. All eyes turned to him, then to me. I had not arranged any delivery, and for a moment I was genuinely confused. James stepped aside, and another staff member entered carrying a magazine with its cover facing away from the table. The timing was so perfect it seemed orchestrated, though I knew it must be coincidence. It was marked urgent, James explained, his expression revealing nothing as the server approached my seat. The courier insisted it be delivered immediately. As the server turned the magazine around to hand it to me, the Forbes cover became visible to everyone at the table. My professional headshot stared back at them, alongside the bold headline, Meet Tech's Most Secretive Billionaire CEO. The silence that followed was absolute. I accepted the magazine with steady hands, thanking the server as if receiving an advance copy of Forbes, featuring myself on the cover, was an everyday occurrence. Looking up, I surveyed the frozen tableau around the table. Every face registered shock in its own unique way. My father had been mid-sip when the magazine appeared. He now sat motionless, wine glass still raised, his complexion reddening as he processed what he was seeing. Beside him, my mother's perfectly maintained composure had cracked, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. Diana had the most dramatic reaction. All color had drained from her face, leaving her porcelain pale beneath her perfect makeup. Her eyes darted from the magazine to my face and back again, as if searching for evidence of some elaborate practical joke. Bradford looked similarly stunned, his usual confident expression replaced by utter confusion. Uncle Harold was the first to break the silence with a startled laugh. Good God, is that real? I placed the magazine on the table, allowing the cover to be fully visible to everyone. It appears the publication date was moved up, I said calmly. This was supposed to hit newsstands tomorrow morning. This island. You are. My mother struggled to form a coherent sentence, gesturing helplessly at the magazine. My father finally lowered his wine glass, some of its contents having sloshed onto the white tablecloth during his frozen moment of shock. Kristen, he said, his authoritative voice uncharacteristically uncertain. What exactly is going on here? I took a deep breath, savoring this moment I had imagined countless times over the years. I am the founder and CEO of Secure Vision, have been since the beginning. The mysterious K.E. Adams that tech journals have speculated about for years, that is me, Kristen Elizabeth Adams. But that company is worth, Bradford began, his financial mind immediately calculating. As of our last valuation, just over $11 billion, I finished for him. The article estimates my personal net worth at $4.2 billion, though that is somewhat conservative. Diana made a small, strangled sound. Cousin Melissa gasped audibly. Across the table, expressions ranged from astonishment to disbelief, to the beginning glimmers of recalculation. Why would you keep this a secret? My mother finally managed. From your own family? It was the question I had anticipated, and yet hearing it spoken aloud made me realize how deeply they had failed to understand me, even now. The answer seemed so obvious from my perspective that articulating it was difficult. When I started Secure Vision, no one in this family believed in me or my vision. I said simply, the decision to remain anonymous as CEO was initially a business strategy. In an industry dominated by men, being a young female founder created unnecessary obstacles. Using only my initials and maintaining privacy allowed the company and our technology to be evaluated on merit alone. But after you became successful, my father pressed, his business mind engaging, why continue the charade? By then, the pattern was established with this family, I replied, looking directly at Diana. Every holiday, every phone call, every family gathering included reminders of how I had failed to meet expectations, how my choice to leave Yale was a mistake, how I would never achieve what Diana had. After a while, it became a fascinating social experiment. How would all of you treat me if you never knew about my success? You deliberately misled us, Diana said, finding her voice at last. Her tone held accusation, but her expression betrayed deeper emotions. Shock, embarrassment, and something that looked surprisingly like hurt. I simply chose not to correct your assumptions, I countered. Assumptions you were all too eager to make based on superficial indicators like my clothes or my car. Not once in 10 years did anyone at this table ask meaningful questions about my work or show genuine interest in my life. The brutal truth of this statement hung in the air. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, perhaps reviewing a decade of interactions through this new lens. I always supported your computer interests, my mother protested weakly. I told the Hendersons just last month how creative you were. Telling other people I was creative is not the same as supporting me, Mother, I replied gently. When I needed actual support, when I was starting out and struggling, this family made it clear I was on my own. You could have told us when things turned around, my father argued, his tone suggesting I had somehow robbed him of rightful pride. Would that have changed how you valued me as a person? I asked. Because from where I stand, a child should not need to become a billionaire to earn their parents' respect. The weight of my words settled over the table. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had the complete attention of my entire family. No one was checking phones, exchanging knowing glances, or waiting for me to finish so they could steer the conversation back to more impressive achievements. Uncle Harold broke the tension with a loud laugh. Well, I will be damned. Our Kristen, a tech mogul in disguise. That is the best thing I have heard in years. His genuine amusement seemed to shift the atmosphere slightly. Cousin Melissa began peppering me with questions about the company and what we actually did. Bradford, ever the pragmatist, visibly recalibrated his assessment of me, his expression now showing keen interest rather than dismissal. My parents remained stunned, occasionally glancing at the magazine cover, as if to confirm they were not imagining things. My father, trained to see opportunity in every situation, seemed to be mentally rewriting family history, perhaps already imagining how he would tell friends his daughter was a self-made billionaire. Only Diana remained silent, her face a complex mixture of emotions. The sister who had defined herself partially through comparison with me now had to reconcile a decade of superiority with this new reality. As the initial shock began to dissipate, the questions became more specific. What exactly did Secure Vision do? How had I maintained my anonymity? Was I really worth billions? Each answer I provided seemed to further transform how they saw me, their revised understanding taking shape before my eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was not Kristen the disappointment. I was Kristen the successful, Kristen the powerful, Kristen worth listening to. The irony that it took extreme wealth to earn this basic respect was not lost on me. So, all these years when we thought you were struggling, my mother said slowly, you were actually building one of the fastest growing tech companies in history. I completed. Living modestly by choice, not necessity, and watching how differently people treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them. The magnitude of what I was saying seemed to finally penetrate my parents' carefully constructed worldview. My father, always strategic, was the first to attempt damage control. Well, this is certainly unexpected but wonderful news, he said, raising his glass. To Kristen, whose success has clearly exceeded all our expectations. We always knew you had potential, dear. The transparent attempt to rewrite history might have worked at another time. But tonight, with the evidence of their decade-long dismissal still echoing in the room, it fell flat. Did you really? I asked quietly. Because I distinctly remember being told I had thrown my life away, that I would never amount to anything without the right credentials and connections, that my work was just playing with computers. My father lowered his glass, unaccustomed to having his revised narratives challenged. Perhaps we were wrong about some things, my mother conceded carefully. But we only wanted what was best for you. What you thought was best, I corrected, based on a very narrow definition of success. Diana finally spoke again, her voice tight with complex emotions. I suppose you must have enjoyed watching us underestimate you all these years. Quite the elaborate deception. There it was, the attempt to make me the villain in this story, to frame my privacy as manipulation rather than self-preservation. But before I could respond, an unlikely defender spoke up. Diana, Bradford said sharply, I think we would all do well to reflect on how we have treated Kristen before questioning her choices. Diana stared at her husband in shock. Bradford had never contradicted her publicly before. The alliance between them had always been seamless, their united front part of their perfect image. This small crack revealed how quickly power dynamics could shift. I never intended this as some sort of revenge scenario, I said honestly. Initially, I kept my success private because I did not want it to change how people treated me. I wanted relationships based on who I am, not what I have. But over time, it became apparent that this family had already decided who I was, and no ordinary success would change that perception. So you waited until you were on the cover of Forbes? Diana asked, a hint of her usual sharpness returning. I agreed to the Forbes interview because it was time, I explained. Secure Vision is launching a new consumer security product next month that could help millions of people protect their personal data. The publicity serves the company's mission. The timing with tonight's dinner was coincidental, though I cannot deny the poetic justice. Across the table, I could see the wheels turning as each family member processed what this revelation meant for them personally. My father was likely calculating potential business connections. My mother was probably imagining telling her friends at the country club. Diana was reassessing our lifelong competition. Bradford was considering investment opportunities. None of them, I noted with a mixture of sadness and resignation, seemed to be thinking about me as a person rather than an asset. Some things, it seemed, even billions of dollars could not change. As the initial shock began to wear off, the family reactions diversified. James quietly directed the servers to bring coffee and digestives, the normal dinner service continuing around our extraordinary conversation as if wealthy tech CEOs were revealed at the Addams family table every evening. "I simply cannot believe you kept this from us for so long," my mother repeated, shaking her head. "All those holiday dinners, those family gatherings. Was it amusing for you, watching us worry about your future?" "It was not about amusement, Mother," I replied evenly. "And I do not recall much genuine worry, mostly judgment and comparisons." "We only pushed because we cared," she insisted. "Did you?" I asked. "Because there is a difference between caring about someone's well-being and caring about how their choices reflect on you." My father, ever the pragmatist, was already moving past the emotional aspects of the revelation. "We should discuss how to handle the publicity," he said, slipping into business mode. "The family will be associated with your success. There will be increased scrutiny, interview requests. I have a full public relations team managing the rollout," I assured him. "They are prepared for the family angle. No one will blindside you with questions." "Your team should coordinate with Bradford's media contacts," Diana interjected, rapidly recovering her composure. "He has excellent relationships with several financial publications that could provide favorable coverage." And there it was, the pivot I had anticipated. Now that my success was established, they would attempt to associate themselves with it, to retroactively claim some role in my achievements. The narrative would shift from Kristen the disappointment to Kristen the family success story, with careful editing of the intervening years. "I have always believed in your intelligence," Diana continued, her tone suddenly warm and sisterly. "Remember how I used to help you with your science projects? I always told Mother you had a technical mind." The blatant revisionism was almost impressive in its audacity. Diana had never helped with my projects. She had barely acknowledged my academic achievements, focusing instead on what she considered my social failings. "Strange," I replied. "I remember you telling me computers were for people who could not handle real human interaction. During Thanksgiving dinner, 2019, I believe." Diana flushed slightly. "Well, perhaps I was a bit harsh sometimes, but that is what sisters do. Push each other to be better. Is that what you were doing when you told your friends I was basically unemployed? Or when you made those food stamp comments? Pushing me to be better?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Bradford cleared his throat. "I think what Diana means is that family dynamics are complicated," he offered diplomatically. "But now we can move forward with a new understanding." "A new understanding," I repeated thoughtfully. "That is an interesting way to phrase it. Because from where I sit, nothing about me has actually changed tonight. I am the same person I was when I arrived at dinner. The only thing that is different is your perception of my value." "That is not fair, Kristen," my father protested. "How are we supposed to know about your success if you deliberately hid it from us?" "You are not supposed to know about my bank account," I clarified. "But you could have known me as a person, my values, my passions, the work that gives my life meaning. None of you ever asked." My mother looked genuinely confused. "We asked about your job all the time. You asked what position I held and whether I had been promoted," I corrected. "You never once asked what my work meant to me, what problems I was solving, what impact I hoped to have on the world." The distinction seemed to genuinely perplex her, which told me everything about the gulf between our worldviews. "Well, we are asking now," Uncle Harold said kindly. "Tell us about this security company of yours. What exactly does it do?" It was the first genuine question anyone had asked about my work itself, rather than its financial implications. I felt a sudden rush of appreciation for my uncle, who had always been the most straightforward member of the family. "We develop artificial intelligence systems that predict and prevent cyber attacks," I explained, warming to my subject. "Our technology protects everything from banking systems to hospital networks to government infrastructure. Last year alone, we prevented attacks that could have compromised the personal data of over 300 million people." As I spoke about the actual substance of my work, I noticed a distinct split in reactions around the table. My uncle and cousin Melissa listened with genuine interest. Bradford paid close attention, likely assessing potential investment angles. But my parents and Diana seemed impatient with the technical details, more concerned with the status implications than the actual innovation. And this has made you a billionaire? My father interrupted, steering back to the financial aspect. Extraordinary. We should discuss your investment strategy. I have some connections at Goldman Sachs who could help diversify your holdings. My financial team has things well in hand, thank you, I replied. But family advice is different, he insisted. You need people you can trust. The irony of this statement hung in the air. Trust required to be earned, and this family had shown me repeatedly that their assessment of my worth was conditional on external markers of success. Speaking of family, Diana said, switching tactics smoothly, you will have to come visit us in Boston soon. The children would love to spend time with their successful aunt. They are at such impressionable ages, and having strong female role models is so important. These were the same niece and nephew she had previously limited my contact with, explaining to others within my hearing that Aunt Kristen is still figuring her life out as if my choices might somehow contaminate her perfect children. That would be nice, I said neutrally, though we both knew the dynamic had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the cautionary tale but the success story they would want to claim. Perhaps you could speak at their school, Diana suggested. They have a wonderful career day program. I will check my schedule, I replied, knowing that I was now booked for months with media appearances, investor meetings, and product launches. Throughout this conversation, my mother had been uncharacteristically quiet, studying me with an expression I could not quite interpret. Finally, she spoke. I just do not understand why you felt you could not tell us, she said, and for the first time that evening, I heard genuine hurt beneath the social veneer. We are your parents. We have always wanted your happiness. This moment of vulnerability caught me off guard. In all my imagined scenarios of this revelation, I had anticipated defensiveness, attempts to rewrite history, and rapid pivots to capitalize on my success. I had not prepared for the possibility of genuine hurt feelings. I think we have different definitions of happiness, I said carefully. You wanted me to follow a path that would make you proud among your social circle. I needed to build something meaningful on my own terms. And we would not have been proud of this? My father asked, gesturing to the magazine. Would you have supported me getting there? I countered. When I was sleeping on a mattress on my office floor? When I was living on ramen noodles and working 20-hour days? When 90% of similar ventures fail? Or would you have pressured me to give up, to take the safe corporate job, to return to the fold? His silence was answer enough. The truth is, I continued, this family has always measured worth in a very specific way. The right schools, the right career, the right connections, the right address. I chose a different path, and that choice was treated as a personal failure rather than a legitimate alternative. That is not true, Diana protested, but her objection lacked conviction. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time anyone at this table expressed genuine interest in my work before knowing its financial outcome? When was the last time my choices were respected rather than tolerated? When was the last time I was judged by who I am rather than by what I have? The questions hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. For perhaps the first time, I was speaking my truth without filtering it through the need for approval. I think, my mother said slowly, we may have been wrong about some things. Coming from Eleanor Adams, this qualified admission was unprecedented. My mother had built her identity around being correct in all matters of social importance, her judgments as precisely calibrated as her table settings. I appreciate that, I said, softening slightly. And I hope this can be a turning point for how we relate to each other. But that will require real change, not just an adjustment based on my bank account. Diana, never comfortable with genuine emotional moments, quickly steered the conversation to safer ground. So, will you be moving now? Upgrading your lifestyle? I know a wonderful real estate agent who specializes in luxury properties. I like my house, I replied simply, and my car works perfectly well. My lifestyle choices are not about financial limitations. They are about personal values. This concept seemed to genuinely perplex her. In Diana's world, wealth existed to be displayed through the right address, the right car, the right schools, the right vacations. The idea that someone might choose modesty despite vast resources did not compute. But surely you will make some changes, she pressed. Perhaps a vacation home? Or at least some new clothes? I glanced down at my simple black blouse. What is wrong with my clothes? Nothing, she backpedaled quickly. They are just not what someone in your position typically wears. And what position is that exactly? I asked, though I knew perfectly well what she meant. A CEO, a billionaire, she said, the last word still sounding strange in reference to me. The freedom of wealth, I told her, is getting to decide for yourself what success looks like, rather than performing it for others. As coffee was served and the evening began winding down, the conversation fractured into smaller discussions. Bradford cornered me about potential investment opportunities. My father made thinly veiled suggestions about family businesses that could benefit from my resources. Cousin Melissa asked genuinely interesting questions about women in technology. Through it all, I maintained a calm center, neither rejecting my family entirely nor allowing myself to be absorbed into their revised narrative. The truth was, these relationships were complex, layered with history that could not be erased by a single revelation, no matter how dramatic. Diana approached as I was preparing to leave, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. I owe you an apology, she said quietly, away from the others. Some of my comments over the years have been unkind. It was perhaps the closest thing to genuine contrition I had ever heard from my sister, though it stopped well short of acknowledging the full pattern of behavior. Thank you for saying that, I replied, choosing not to make it easy by immediately accepting. I hope we can start fresh, she continued. I have always admired your independence, you know, even if I did not always understand your choices. The revision of history was subtle but unmistakable. Diana had never admired my independence. She had condemned it, ridiculed it, used it as evidence of my failure to understand how the world really worked. I would like a better relationship, I said honestly, but it would need to be based on who we actually are, not who we pretend to be for appearances. She nodded, though I was not entirely convinced she understood what I meant. For Diana, appearance and reality had been intertwined for so long that separating them might be genuinely difficult. As James helped me with my coat, my mother approached for a final word. Will you come to Sunday brunch next week? She asked. We have so much to catch up on. The invitation was new. Sunday brunch had long been reserved for Diana and her family, a tradition I was rarely included in. I will check my calendar, I promised, not committing but not refusing either. As I prepared to leave, I realized that while the evening had unfolded largely as I had anticipated, the aftermath would be more complicated than I had imagined. Money changes everything, the saying goes, and tonight had proven it true in ways both expected and surprising. Walking to my ordinary car in the circular driveway, now seeing the contrast through their eyes, I wondered if true family understanding was possible, or if we were destined to remain separated by fundamentally different values, regardless of financial status. The revelation had been satisfying, but the real test would be what happened next, when the shock wore off and we all had to decide what kind of relationship we wanted moving forward, with all pretenses finally stripped away. 3 months after the dramatic Forbes reveal, I sat in a sleek conference room overlooking Seattle's skyline, finalizing details for the Secure Vision Foundation's first grant cycle. The foundation, endowed with $200 million of my personal funds, would provide support to promising tech entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds, with a particular focus on those who, like me, had faced significant obstacles on their journey. The application portal goes live next Tuesday, my foundation director, Rachel, confirmed as she reviewed our timeline. Press release is scheduled for Monday morning. We have already received informal interest from over 300 potential applicants. Excellent, I nodded, scanning the finalized criteria. And the mentorship program? 20 industry leaders confirmed, including 7 women in tech leadership roles. Each grant recipient will be paired with a mentor whose experience aligns with their project focus. The foundation represented everything I had wished for when starting my own company. Financial support, without family strings attached. Mentorship from people who understood the technical challenges. Connection to networks that had been closed to me as a female founder, without the right background. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from my mother. Confirming Sunday brunch, 11 a.m. Diana and family will join. Looking forward to seeing you. The relationship with my family had evolved in unexpected ways since the night of the revelation. The initial reactions, a mixture of shock, opportunism, and revisionist history, had gradually given way to something more nuanced as the reality of my success settled in. My father, after several attempts to insert himself into my financial affairs, had eventually accepted my boundaries with grudging respect. We had found common ground discussing business strategy in general terms, and while he still occasionally suggested opportunities that would benefit the family, he no longer presumed to direct my decisions. My mother had made the most genuine effort to rebuild our relationship. Her weekly calls now included questions about my actual work rather than just my social life, and while she still did not fully understand my technology, she had stopped dismissing it as a mere computer hobby. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Diana had been the most complex case. After her initial apology, she had oscillated between competitive resentment and attempts to associate herself with my success. Our relationship remained strained, but had found a new equilibrium based on mutual acknowledgement of past patterns and tentative steps toward something healthier. I had set clear boundaries with all of them. Sunday brunches were now a regular but not weekly commitment. I attended family gatherings on my own terms, no longer feeling obligated to absorb judgment or criticism. Most importantly, I had made it clear that while I was open to rebuilding relationships, I would not be using my resources to elevate family members who had dismissed me during my struggling years. The Forbes article had opened doors I had not anticipated. As one of the few female tech billionaires, and one with an unusual story, I had been invited to speak at conferences, universities, and industry events. After a decade of deliberate anonymity, stepping into the public eye had been an adjustment, but one that allowed me to advocate for changes I believed in, particularly around diversity in tech leadership. Rachel cleared her throat, bringing my attention back to the meeting. There is one more item for today. The board is asking about your decision regarding the acquisition offer from Global Tech. Global Tech, one of the largest technology conglomerates in the world, had recently approached Secure Vision with an offer that would have made headlines, $18 billion, nearly double our current valuation. The financial advisors had strongly recommended accepting, but I had reservations about the company's direction under their ownership. My answer is still no, I said firmly. Our mission is too important to compromise. We will remain independent and focused on security as a human right, not just a premium service for those who can afford it. Rachel nodded, unsurprised. I will relay that to the board. Your control stake makes it your decision, ultimately. As the meeting concluded, I walked to the window overlooking the city where my journey had begun. The struggling entrepreneur, sleeping on an office floor, seemed both a lifetime ago and just yesterday. The wealth, the recognition, the influence, all of it was valuable primarily as tools to create the change I wanted to see in the world. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Diana. Bradford and I are considering investing in a tech startup. Would appreciate your thoughts if you have time. I smiled slightly at the message. It represented both progress and lingering issues. On one hand, Diana was acknowledging my expertise and seeking my input. On the other, there was still an element of wanting access to what I had, of trying to replicate my success now that it was verified by external validation. I texted back, happy to review their business plan. Send details and I will make time next week. Small steps, imperfect progress, real relationships were built this way, not through dramatic revelations or instant transformations. Later that evening, I drove my still modest car, which I kept more out of attachment than frugality now, to a local community college where I had been mentoring a group of promising students in cybersecurity. None of them had the advantages of my early life, the private schools or family connections, but all of them had the determination and raw talent that mattered more. As I watched them work through a complex security problem, collaborating and challenging each other's assumptions, I felt a sense of purpose deeper than any validation Forbes or my family could provide. This, ultimately, was success. Using what I had built to create opportunity for others, to multiply potential, rather than simply accumulate resources. The journey from food stamps to Forbes cover had taught me lessons no Ivy League education could have provided. The value of self-belief when no one else sees your vision. The importance of defining success on your own terms. The revelation that family approval, while desired, is not necessary for achieving your dreams. And perhaps most importantly, that true wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in the impact you create and the lives you touch. My phone buzzed once more. A notification from my assistant. Reminder. Investor call tomorrow, 9 a.m. Consumer product launch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build something meaningful. The Forbes cover was already yesterday's news, the food stamps comment a fading memory. What remained was the work, the purpose, the continuing journey forward. Have you ever had a moment when your true value was finally recognized by people who had underestimated you? Or perhaps you have been on the other side, realizing too late that you misjudged someone important in your life. Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the sweetest success is proving wrong those who never believed in you. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder that other people's opinions do not determine your worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, the best revenge is not just success, but success on your own authentic terms.